solutions to tackle climate change, inequality, and global fragmentation. We will begin the global meetings with a series of opening remarks by the co-chairs. Please welcome to the stage Karim Aynaoui, Executive President of the Policy Center for the New South. Harinder Kohli, Founding Director and Chief Executive at the Emerging Markets Forum. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, former Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission of India. And Enrique Garcia, former President and CEO of the Development Bank of Latin America. Karim Aynaoui, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Voice of God, which is RIM. Thank you, RIM. So my dear friends, welcome. It's really a pleasure to be here and to see this happening. Harinder, thank you for your trust. We've talked about this a while ago, and here we are today. Yeah. Alhamdulillah. Thank you. So, when there's a will, there's a way. And before thanking our friends at the Emerging Market Forum, what is more important, I think, is to share the spirit in which we are meeting here. And I found in Harinder and his colleague spiritual and spirited and animated friends. And for us at the Policy Center for the New South, it is fundamental. We do what we do with our hearts, with something that comes from inside. You call it breath, you call it soul, whatever, but something that comes from the inside and that drives us to a very simple thing. Of course, simplest things are very complex. It's just an illusion. But you know, it's the place of the New South in this world. And this is where we meet. The Emerging Market Forum is just a more technical ways of saying things. And it had the same kind of spirit, I would say, 20 or 30 years ago, as you are older than the Policy Center. But today we call it the Global South, the New South. And this is really interesting that this is happening in Marrakesh, where, in fact, the North, the Global North, as they now sort of see themselves, meets here in Marrakesh, in one of the country of Africa, one of the country of the New South, to discuss important matters. But these important matters beyond the current macroeconomic situation, inflation, monetary policy, tightening, what it means, interest rates, financial stability. What is important for us, and this is why we're doing this together, it's really what can we do to have better development finance for the 21st century, and in particular for Africa, for other countries of the New South, but in particular for us, for Africa. How can we have more efficient Bretton Woods institutions, particularly those that are specializing in development finance, and also the African Development Bank for our continent. And it's not about politics, it's about delivery, it's about efficiency. So I'm hearing, and we're all hearing, reforms of more voice, of more EDs, but I think fundamentally it's really, we want here in Africa institutions that deliver infrastructure, access to health, the climate transition, electricity, etc., etc. And it's an issue of scale. It's an issue of scale. It's not easy to scale up. It's a challenge to scale up. It's a challenge to draw in private sector money. It's not easy. Those institutions have some tradition, but not, I would say, a massive, significant tradition. Private sector money into development. So project origination, the pipeline of a project remains a fundamental issue. So there are many technicalities we will look at during this week together. So again, I just wanted to share briefly the spirit of why we're doing this together here from our viewpoint at the Policy Center for the New South. So really warm welcome to all of you here in Marrakesh. We're really glad to have you with us. Please sink in with us if you have time. It's, to feel a spirit, you need to sink in a little bit. You need to take the time. There are great people to meet around you. Harinder, many thanks, really, through you, to your staff, to Sylvie and other colleagues. It's been, a pleasure to prepare this with you, and inshallah, it's going to be even more pleasurable to run this conference and to leave it now that it is happening on the ground. So many thanks also to your co-chairs, and looking forward to continue and intensify our exchanges over the coming days. Thank you.
Enrique Garcia, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. It's indeed, as one of the co-chairmen of the Emerging Market Forum, I'm quite honored to welcome you to this 16th annual global meeting. And what is interesting, it's the first time that we have a global meeting in Africa. So great to be here in Morocco. I want to start my brief remarks expressing our sincere recognition and admiration to the Moroccan authorities, leaders, and population in general for their courage, resilience, and strong commitment with which they have responded to the dramatic events related to the recent earthquake. In this context, we deeply thank the Executive President of the Policy Center for the New South, our dear friend Karim Aynaoui, and his colleagues for the remarkable efforts they have made to host this meeting. No doubt we are living in a challenging world where crucial geopolitical, economic, social, and environmental issues in a context characterized by fragmentation and polarization are evolving day after day. In this context, it's not only the impact of the pandemic, not only the dynamic evolution of the fourth industrial revolution, and more recently, artificial intelligence, but we see as a worrisome phenomena the acceleration of global tensions. 2-3 years ago, we were concerned about the tensions, especially between China and the United States. But now, surprise, surprise, in this year, we have the Russia-Ukraine war, and in the last few days, the Hamas-Israel dramatic situation. And of course, the result of all this environment, geopolitical, and some of the fragmentations I referred to, have meant that there's a widening of economic and social gaps in income per capita in productivity, in competitiveness, and especially in income and wealth distribution among regions, within regions, and within the countries. Global warming. We see how dangerous and how this is evolving. And two elements which are crucial: the weakening of democratic institutions in many parts of the world, and, sorry to say, the weakening of multilateralism. So we are here, I think, in a very opportune moment. And we certainly believe that this forum is the perfect scenario to have a discussion on the critical issues, make an analysis, and have an impact and influence on policymakers around the world. It's very important that to emphasize, and the agenda clearly shows this, the holistic approach that is required. It's not only discussed in an isolated way income distribution, environment, macroeconomic stability. We have to look together. Unfortunately, that's not happening. So the challenge is that we discuss that. So, and welcome you, and thank you again, our good friends in Morocco. I wish that the topics that will be covered, the discussion, as I said before, will be an important input for future policy making. So enjoy this day. I'm sure that we are going to have very positive results in a crucial moment for the history, for the world, for the region, and for our nations. Thank you very much.
Montek, Singh, Ahluwalia, the floor is yours.
Well, it's a great pleasure for me to be here. I think I've been associated with almost all the meetings of the EMC, pretty much from the very beginning, when in 2005, the EMC met in Oxford. You know, it's interesting because we've always had governmental, intergovernmental delegation meetings around the world. There's also quite a well-established practice of business people meeting and interacting with government. That's the Davos crowd. But the Emerging Markets Forum, I thought, was different because it wasn't dominated by government, although it had many people who had been in government earlier, and it wasn't actually dominated by business people, although it did have business people interested in these issues, and many more representatives, if you like, from the academia, profession, civil society, etc. And I think over time, the importance of this broader group, I think, has increased. Because when you look back, until about 2005, when the first meeting took place, you know, the crises of the world were dominantly crises that emerged in developing countries. And sort of the perception was they have to be solved by a more helpful and a more understanding developed world, with also a more sensitive multilateral development system. From 2008 onwards, after the Lehman Brothers crisis, it became quite clear that the global economy has inherent vulnerabilities, not just because of developing countries. The system itself may not have been broke, but it was seriously deficient and it needed to be addressed. I mean, I had the pleasure of both attending EMC meetings in that period and also being a Sherpa for India in that period, so one could see the tension on the governmental side and also on the non-governmental side. Now, this has actually only increased over time, but I think in the very early years, everybody operated on the assumption that there was a global consensus consensus on what are the basic rules for a well-functioning global economy. It was private sector dominated, highly reliant on world trade, everybody had to be open, etc., etc. Now, these underlying assumptions have come under a lot of strain in the last 4 or 5 years. Strain really not from the developing countries, but actually they're being questioned in the developed countries themselves. So there is if you like, a retreat from globalization. Some people wonder how deep it is. There's also a geopolitical fragmentation. It's no longer thought that the world necessarily shares a common vision on where we should go. There are alternative and competing visions. And that, of course, leads to fragmentation of policy on the part of the larger countries. More than that, we're now faced with the climate challenge, which is a completely humongous challenge facing everybody. And it's humongous because the time frame on which both the effects of the climate change, if it's not handled, will be felt, and also the time frame in which responses to sensible policies will be felt. So you're really talking, the debate is one where people would invariably say that if you don't do this, we will have a big problem 10 years from now. Alternatively, if you do this, within 10 years, you'll see a difference. Now, to my knowledge, since we are all now democratic, there's no politician whose time horizon is greater than the next election. So setting an agenda to do things which will make sense 10 years from now looks like a losing proposition, and therefore it's very important for the intellectual driving forces in the world to actually recognize that this is a problem and talk to their own governments to make sure that our governments operate on that time scale. And it's not a question of just saying to the rest of the world, we have a problem, what are you going to do about it? Now, this is the whole issue of developing countries having to look at themselves and see what they need to do for getting a better development outcome is very nicely brought out by this book which Harinder and his colleague Rajat Nag have just produced, which will be, I think, circulated for this conference, Good Governance. This is one of the most difficult things to put across. It's one of those things that everybody agrees with, and nobody quite knows what to do to achieve that result. So I'm saying all this not to preview what you're going to discuss, but just to say that, the agenda has become a lot more diverse and a lot richer. And I think, therefore, I'm looking forward to a really good conference. But before I close, since I don't have that much time, I should thank our co-host, the New South Foundation, for partnering with the Emerging Markets Forum, and also the government of Morocco for facilitating this whole forum. And last of all, I have to mention that, everybody mentions the way the world is changing. I think we have to recognize that it also changes quite unpredictably, very, very quickly. And the events in the last few days in Gaza indicate that one can very easily be overtaken by developments that nobody anticipated, which have horrendous consequences. And one just hopes that they will somehow be managed so that they don't lead to a completely new fissure in the world's thinking on how to move forward. And actually the time for that is quite limited, because really it's in the next 2 days that we ideally before the conference ends, we should be able to say whether or not that particular problem has at least been contained. I mean, a solution is an altogether different thing, but it just shows you that making progress in the world of international negotiations has just become very, very much more complex, which is why meetings like this one have become very, very much more important. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Harinder Kohli, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My task is very simple. I'll be very brief and say only 4 things. First and most important is to thank my dear friend Karim for his very kind remarks and for hosting our forum. As he said, this has been our common dream now for, I think, 4 years. He first broached the idea when he was with us in Virginia, and I think he enjoyed our forum there. He made a great contribution, as he always does, both intellectually and personally. And he said, why don't you bring this forum to Morocco? And so we said yes. And then this pandemic struck and interrupted our scheme, our dream, I would say. And then last year, when he was with us in Paris, he repeated that suggestion, and I grabbed him and I said, well, you know, let's do it. And here we are. So thank you, Karim. And it's a pleasure. And thank you for your kind remarks. And I'm so happy that this dream has come true. And you will see the results, not only this evening, but for the next 2 days. Thank you. I also want to say the second point, which has been mentioned by Enrique already. And that is that I do want to say again on behalf of our forum that we have great respect and admiration for people of Morocco, for their fortitude, for their courage, for their resilience, for recovering from the trauma, for tragedy because of the earthquake, but also the solidarity they have shown for each other and the speed with which the country, the people have recovered. And how they have worked together with each other and worked with the authorities. And the earthquake, this epicenter of the earthquake was only 75 kilometers from where we sit. And yes, there are a few cracks on the walls of our rooms, but you really don't see the big damage, how quickly they repaired the roads in Marrakesh proper, and how the authorities were able to host the big event of the World Bank and IMF annual meetings, as well as our forum. So I really want to express our admiration and our support for the Moroccan people and for the country as a whole. Third, I want to explain that why we have only 2 of our co-chairs in front of you today. Our third co-chair, Mr. Watanabe, will be landing. He's just landed, actually, in Casablanca. You will meet him at dinner. He will be coming straight from his hotel to join us for dinner, and he'll be speaking to us tomorrow morning. You will be listening to our oldest and founding co-chair, who is 91 years old now, Mr. Kamdesu, but because of his bad back, he cannot be in a plane, so he'll be speaking to us from Paris. But our last co-chair, Mr. Jin Lequin, the president of AIB, he has a very bad flu. So he regrets that he cannot be with us. His doctors have confined him in Beijing. But those of you who will be with us next year, next November, most likely in Japan, he'll be joining us in Japan. So I wanted to explain why 2 of our co-chairs will not be with us in Marrakesh physically, even though they wanted to be. The last point, which is how the New South, the term that Karim likes to use, is leapfrogging over the North. And I want to sort of say that, the South, the old South was known as one of the things was that we are never on time. But the New South, we'll demonstrate, can be ahead of time. So we're going to finish this session, Karim and I, ahead of schedule, which is printed, and start the next session early. And why we want to do that? Why we want to be super efficient and run trains which are faster than the famous Swiss and Japanese train, because the next session is going to discuss issues which I think will be so interesting to all of us that we want to create more time for discussion before dinner. So we'll conclude this session now so that we can start the next session early, which will be chaired by Karim. Thank you very much. So Karim, the next session is yours. I hope our speakers have arrived by now.
Ladies and gentlemen,
you'll hear me more tomorrow about the structure of the forum from tomorrow onwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, the session has come to an end. We invite you for a coffee break and refreshments in the foyer. We will reconvene at 5 p.m. in the auditorium.